Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye to Piccadilly, farewell Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there. And come your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. While you the Lucifer to light your flag. Smile, boys, that's the style. What's the use of worrying? It never was worthwhile. So pack up the troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile.
Hello BBros and welcome back to that British Tanks devlog video I promised you. Didn't quite get around to doing one every time they released one, since they have been releasing basically two every day. So can't quite keep up with that, and I suspect by the time this video goes out there will be probably another one that I've missed. However, I can't really miss anything in terms of telling you what we are actually going to be getting, as they have released a full tree on release for the release tree of British tanks, which we have here. So I'm going to start off by showing you some of the anti-aircraft tanks. Now, interesting thing about these is this is where we are getting our first armoured cars in the game. Now, obviously they are anti-aircraft vehicles rather than actual having their own line, which I'm assuming eventually we will have an armoured car line with 2-pounder armed tanks and armoured cars even, and things like that. But for now we just have the anti-aircraft armoured cars, which I believe we have. I would say we've had them before, but not really. I mean, they're half tracks in the American line, so not quite the same thing. But we have had a couple of trucks in the Russian line. So anyway, these are the actual first properly armoured vehicles that are wheeled. So we've got the T-17E2, which is in fact an American design that was kitted out with a British turret. I believe it's British. It could actually just be a Lend-Lease. No, the turret is British, right? And this is a rather interesting one. Now, obviously it is an anti-aircraft tank, so that is going to its primary role. However, it can, I'm assuming it's probably going to be a 1.0, similar to the Flak Panzer 1. But because of that, it's got 250 cals. It's going to be able to do some pretty decent damage to all the other tanks in the game. And on top of that, it has an awesome speed. So that is going to be very interesting. Next up, we have an old British armoured car design, the Armoured Car Mark II. Well, the AA version, obviously. Now, interestingly, this has actually got, I believe, the same turret as the Crusader AA, which we see later in the tree. With twin 20mm, so this is probably going to be a little bit further down the tree, probably tier 2, probably around 2.3 battle rating, but that's still pretty impressive. Twin 20mm, that battle rating is gonna just kill a lot of tanks, basically. You might have some trouble with T-34s, but other than that, those Panzer IVs are just gonna be crew dead, gunner dead, commander dead, loader dead. Yeah, they're gonna have a lot of trouble. And again, the blistering speed is going to be awesome. There is actually a 2-pounder armed version of this vehicle, which I cannot wait to see if they implement. Anyway, on to the next AAA tank, the Crusader AAA Mark I. Now, I don't know if any of you saw this, but a while back that we, on the Rumour Roundup thread, on the 1.55 Rumour Roundup thread on the forums, which I'll put a link for in the description, we found a leaked list of the release tree for British tanks. Now, it's possible that it's still possible that it's not actually authentic. We weren't sure when we got it because it was just basically a TXT listing. However, so far it has been reasonably accurate. The only thing that was wrong was the fact that it called the Crusader AAs Cavalier AAs. Wait, was it Cavalier? It was Cavalier. It was one of the early Cromwell variants. It's either Cavalier or the other one, which I can't remember what it's called. Centaur. Ah, yeah, Centaur. That's what it was. Yeah, it called them Centaur AAs, AA even, which obviously we were very surprised by because, well, the Crusader was much more widely used and it was more obsolete by the time the Cromwell came along, so they transferred them all into anti-aircraft tanks. However, that list does appear to have either been a mistype or just not right at all, and we have actually ended up with the Crusader AA Mark I and the Mark II. Now, the Mark I has a 40mm Bofors in a very lightly armoured turret, and the Mark II is, well, the Mark I will also be quite good at tank destroying. I mean, that's basically a 2-pounder that fires like a machine gun, so that's going to be pretty interesting, probably around tier 3. Then we've got the Crusader AA Mark II, which is very similar to something like perhaps the trying to think of a good example. Maybe the Whirlwind? No, that's got 4. It's probably going to be a bit worse than that, but well, it's got more mobility. It's a cruiser. It's Crusader even. I can't speak today. Yeah, so that's going to be very interesting. 20mm even. Aucklands. I believe that's Auckland. Oh, I can't remember. I don't know. How do you expect me to remember all these World War II names? I haven't got a list, you know. Anyway, that's going to be very interesting. And obviously we are going to be getting the Crusaders. Moving on to the light and cruiser tanks line, we are going to be getting Crusaders as well. Now, I believe this tech tree list is not separated. The way this is separated is not going to be the way the lines are separated. So, for example, the Tetrarch is not going to necessarily be in the cruiser line, but this is just what classification they're going to be. It's not the lines they're going to be in, these are just the classifications. So, anyway, yes, A17 Mark I Tetrarch, this is going to be the reserve tank for the British, well, one of the reserve tanks at least, and it's basically just the Tetrarch. You can't really describe it. It's extremely fast, it's got a 2-pounder. And yeah, the other reserve tank for the British, probably going to be at the beginning of the cruiser line. The Tetrarch, I believe, has been said to be at the beginning of the infantry tank line. The other one is the A13 Mark I, which is the Cruiser 3 with the... it's basically a Cruiser 4 with a narrow turret. It's not got the sloping on the sides, which was implemented. I'm not sure why, I don't have any information on that, but I know it was changed. But that is basically the only difference between that and the next one, which is the A13 Mark II. They basically are identical except for the turret. Actually, I believe they might have a different engine. Not sure, could be wrong. And anyway, on to the next one, the Crusader Mark II. Now, this is the early version of the Crusader with the 2-pounder gun, which is on all of the British tanks up to this point. Well, all of the cruiser tanks. And interestingly, looking at these schematics on the list, it has got side skirts. However, the Mark III hasn't. Now, I personally wish they both had side skirts. I don't know about you, but it just seems odd that you wouldn't have them, because they were basically standard on all Crusaders at this point. And also, interestingly, it does look like the Crusader Mark II has an auxiliary turret, which is going to be nice. It's got that little machine gun turret on the front, which you can use in low-tier battles to just do a bit of damage while you're reloading. Mind you, not that that's going to matter with a 2-pounder, because that thing will be reloaded in seconds. Mind you, I have actually had bad experiences in the Cruiser 4 with my loader being dead with the 2-pounder. That's not fun. Anyway, on to the next one, the Crusader Mark III. This is basically the Mark II, except with a 6-pounder and with the auxiliary turret removed. Looking at the schematics, like I said, it doesn't look like it's got side skirts, which I'm a little bit disappointed about, because there's a skin for the Crusader, which I've been wanting to make for the Crusader 3, which is a 6th Armoured Division skin, which is obviously going to be my squadron. Well, I say going to be, it's basically set up now. I just need to finalise a couple of things. Yeah, I'll probably still try and make that skin for something, but probably if... And also, looking at the schematics, these aren't necessarily what the finished product in-game is going to look like, so they might both have side skirts, they might neither have side skirts, we don't know. We just got to wait and find out. And then the next one, we've actually seen video of this one already, is the A27M Cromwell Mark I. Now this one is very nice. I do like the Cromwell. It's very fast, much better armour than any of the earlier tanks. It's going to be at tier 2, facing against tanks like the Panzer IV F2, things like that. It's armed with the 6-pounder, so not as good as the later variant. Well, I say that, it's interesting point about the 6-pounder versus the 75mm. Obviously the 6-pounder has a much higher rate of fire. It also has better penetration. Now, this doesn't necessarily matter depending on which tanks you're facing. I mean, at tier 2 against tanks like the Panzer IV F2 even, against tanks like that it doesn't matter. You don't need that much penetration, they don't have that good armour. However, at later tiers you would need higher penetration. However, the next marker, the Mark V, has got a 75. Now the 75, like I said, has less penetration. However, once it penetrates, it will do more damage. It's got a high explosive filler, it's much more damaging. So I'll be interested to see how that works out, because like I said, it's not depending on how you look at it, as good as the 6-pounder. And of course the last one in the cruiser and light tank line, I say line, it's not line, it's just this classification, is the A34 Comet, which is a very nice tank. This is the replacement for the Cromwell, which is basically a Cromwell with a new turret and a bigger gun. It's got the 77mm QF gun, which is it's still a 17-pounder, because the 17-pounder is a 76.2mm. When you make it a 77mm, it's still 17-pounder. It's still a 17-pounder. Because the millimeter difference doesn't change the weight of the shell. So the A34 Comet, like I said, 17-pounder, much better turret, it's got much better armour, still got the mobility, and it's got much better armour on the hull as well. Moving on to the medium tank line, I believe they put this here just because of the fact that there was that classification between cruiser tank, and the only medium tanks that really existed was the Firefly for the British. And at that point, it's a Lend-Lease, so that's the only reason it was classed as a medium tank, and I believe actually it was referred to as a cruiser tank. However, after the war, the tanks like the Centurion and the Chieftain were classified as main battle tanks, and obviously we haven't got that classification, so they've put them in the medium tank line. So yes, we've got the Sherman 5C Firefly, which we've actually already got in game, interestingly, as a premium. So that's going to be pretty good, probably around tier 3. Then we've got the Centurion Mark III. Now this is where it starts getting interesting. The Centurion is awesome. I cannot wait to get to this tank. It's probably going to be late tier 4, early tier 4. I can't remember. I know they said this. What was it? It's going to face T-44s. So I believe that's battle rating 6.3. And then we've got the Mark X, which has the same gun as the Leopard, which we currently have at tier 5 for the Germans, so I suspect it will probably be at tier 5. And then, of course, interestingly, on this tech tree, they've put soon on the tanks that are not going to be in this update, so it does give us a clue as to what we are going to be getting in the next update. If you have a look at the anti-aircraft tree over here, you can see the Falcon is going to be presumably the tier 5 anti-aircraft tank, which is going to be very interesting. I've had a little look at that and it looks very nice. I haven't really looked at any of the statistics or anything. I don't know what armament it's got. It's got twin guns of some sort. I don't know what they are. And of course the next one is the Chieftain Mark III. That's the other one that's got soon on it. We have seen some leaked images of the model for the Chieftain, but it seems the implementation of that model is not quite finished. And of course we've also got the FV 4004, which is going to be in tier 5. Obviously it's got the 120mm, I believe it is. I think it's the 120, but it's just a tank destroyer based on the Centurion, so it's going to be quite interesting. Anyway, moving on to the heavy and infantry tanks lines, we have, starting off that list, the A12 Mark II Matilda II. I cannot wait to drive this thing. It looks awesome. It's just Queen of the Desert. How can you compare with that? It's just so awesome. It's got a 2-pounder gun. It is one of the best armoured British tanks for its tier. and I suspect it's probably going to get nerfed at some point because it is just going to be awesome. Then we have the Valentine Mark 1. This is very similar to the Matilda, actually, slightly worse armoured and slightly faster, I believe, and it also uses a older method of suspension. However, it's also armed with the 2-pounder, and it's also very well armoured. Then we have the Valentine Mark 9, which is another version of the Valentine, obviously, with the 6-pounder gun, I believe. Yes, 6-pounder. Interestingly, the Valentine was actually very widely upgraded to continue in use right up until the end of the war. It obviously got upgraded with the 6-pounder, and then with the Mark 11, as we see here, it got upgraded with the 75mm, which I was talking about earlier, having lower penetration, better damage. So that's going to be very interesting to play my way down. I cannot wait to do some videos on that, possibly. And I just had a reminder. That's a bit annoying. Funnily enough, it was a reminder to make this video. Right, so next one on the list. There's quite a big jump here. We've got the A22B Churchill Mark III. We've already seen a dev blog on this, and this is obviously what I did a video on previously, which is obviously the version of the Churchill with the 6-pounder. Then we have the A22F Churchill Mark VII, which is the Churchill with the 75mm. So, now, there was quite a gap, people notice, between the Churchill and the Conqueror, which we've both had dev blogs for, and it seems they're going to be filling that gap with the FV221 Carnarvon. I've said that completely wrong, it's supposed to be FV221 Carnarvon, but I'm quite interested in this tank, actually, because it is basically the Conqueror hull with a Centurion turret and what I believe is the 20-pounder gun, which is based on the 88mm. It's an 84mm, I believe, actually. Or it could be 83, I can't remember. But that's going to be quite interesting. You might know it from World of Tanks. I suspect probably a tier 4, so that's going to be quite an interesting tank. I probably won't be playing it anytime soon though, because you know, it's a tier 4 and that takes quite a while to get to. Anyway, on to the next one. We have the Conqueror Mark II, as I mentioned earlier, which has the 120mm gun, which is awesome, and it's also got the much better turret than the Carnarvon. Other than that, it is the same hull. Now, moving on to tank destroyers and self-propelled guns, we have the Valentine tank destroyer. This is a modification of the Valentine, obviously. It's interesting. It's a very interesting design, because if you look at the hull of this thing, it's actually backwards. Yes, the gun is pointing out the back of the tank, so I'm interested to see how they implement this, whether they make it drive backwards to go forwards, or forwards to go backwards, if that makes sense. Because it moves faster backwards if you're looking at it as right, okay, the way I'm going to talk about this is the front of the tank is where the gun is. So it drives faster backwards than it does forwards. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one though, because it obviously has the 17-pounder gun. And I suspect it's not very well armoured though around the gun mantlets specifically, so I suspect it's probably going to be more of a long-range support tank than anything else. Then we have the A30 Challenger, which is a modification of the Cromwell. It's basically an elongated Cromwell chassis with a TOG 2 turret, which is awesome, with the 17-pounder gun. Although obviously it's not actually a TOG 2 turret, it's the Challenger turret that then got put on the TOG 2, I suspect. But it was a modification of the Cromwell to make it more updated for use in the British Army. And yeah, we're going to be getting that presumably at late tier 3, probably similar to the Firefly around 5.0. Now, this next one is one that I know someone who really wanted to have this in-game, and it was looking extremely unlikely for a time. The 3-inch gun carrier, or the Churchill gun carrier as it's mainly known. Now, this thing is a very interesting modification of the Churchill. It's basically a Churchill with a box on top and a gun in it. It's a very big gun. I can't remember the exact calibre. I haven't actually looked at it, but it's going to be very interesting to play, and I suspect probably at early tier 4, late tier 3. Then we have the Achilles, which is obviously already in game as a premium, which I'm presuming is probably going to be exactly the same as the current premium one. Which I'm actually planning on trying to get, because an interesting fact about the Achilles is that it comes with some decals. It's got these 2 decals, as with the Cruiser 4 have a couple of decals. It's got the anti-tank regiment emblem on the front. It's also got the Desert Rats emblem, so that's literally the only reason I want the Achilles, because it has those 2 emblems with it. But I really wish they'd add more division emblems. That's one thing I'd really like, because if you look at I'll bring an image up on the screen here. The system of, say, 6th Armoured Division for organising tank regiments. You've got the main tank regiments, which consisted of tanks, such as cruisers and infantry tanks, which were designated as 51, 52 and 53 in red boxes. That's what those red boxes with numbers in are, the division number, or regiment number even. Now 51 stands for the senior regiment, 52 stands for the secondary regiment, and 53 stands for the junior regiment. So the way this works is those are separated into 3 groups, into 3 regiments, and those regiments then have different squadrons in them. You've got A Squadron, B Squadron, and C Squadron. A Squadron is represented by a triangle, B Squadron is represented by a square, C Squadron is represented by a circle. Now, in the senior regiment, those emblems are red. In the secondary regiment, they are yellow, and in the junior regiment, they are blue. Now, I wish they would include red, blue and yellow triangles, squares and circles, because then you could have your own squadrons set up, and if you could also have the decals for 51, 52 and 53 and so on, you could also have the different regiments, which would be very nice. And then if you look at the other arms of service area, this is where we see the decal that's currently in game on the Achilles, the Anti-Tank Regiment Royal Artillery emblem, the 77 with the blue and red background. There's also the Anti-Aircraft Regiment 73 with the blue and red, and there's also the Armoured Car Regiment, the 44, with the blue and green. Now, these are all decals I think would fit in game very well, and I would love to have them on my tanks. They're also very good for the squadron. Like I said, that's the system we use for our different squadrons. So that would be interesting to see decals like that in game. Anyway, getting back to the tech tree, I've got a little bit off course there. Back to the next one in the line, which is the A30 SP Avenger. Now this one is very interesting. It is, I believe, a Cromwell chassis again. It could be a Comet chassis, I'm not sure on that. No, it is. It's a Cromwell chassis, and it's very similar to the Challenger, except it has a much better turret. It's got, funnily enough, an open top turret, and I believe, actually, I thought it was armed with the 17-pounder, but looking at this image, it looks like it might be armed with the 20-pounder, so that could be interesting. Now we have the Charioteer Mark 7, which is another British tank destroyer, which I believe was it's yet again another modification of the Cromwell. So that's going to be interesting, probably around tier 4, I'd say that is, because it's a very fast tank with a very big gun. And moving on to the next one, we have the A39 Tortoise, which is a completely different approach to British tank destroyer methods. Obviously the Charioteer, like I said, fast moving, big gun. However, this one, slow moving, heavily armoured, big gun. This thing is ridiculous. It's the British equivalent of the T95. Now, well, I say it's the British equivalent, actually it's the first one. The Tortoise came before the T95, but it is basically the same principle. I believe it might have a slightly higher top speed and slightly less armour, but it is going to probably be a long-range sniper that can take a lot of hits. I don't know about you, but I have had a few instances, especially on the Finland map, where we're just moving down between the houses on one side of the map, and there's just this hill at the back, and there's a T95 sitting there, and you just can't do anything. You are going to get owned by his 90mm, and you cannot damage him. He doesn't need to move, he doesn't need to go behind cover, he can just sit there and shoot at you all day. It really is just excellent. I cannot wait to see what people do with the Tortoise. Actually, interestingly, we might even get a few few videos from Squire on that with his nature documentaries. This is going to give a whole host of new creatures that can be in his nature documentaries, in fact, so that could be very interesting. Anyway, that's it for the Armoured Forces tech tree. I've just noticed this video is ticking over onto 25 minutes. This is going to be a very long video. Looks like I I might need to cut it off soon, otherwise I'm going to have about 2 days to upload this video. So yeah, that's the new British Tanks tech tree. We're probably going to be seeing a few more dev blogs on possibly the Crusaders or something like that pretty soon. Can't wait to obviously see the tech tree in game, can't wait to make some skins for it, can't wait to use them in the 6th Armour Division, which is now accepting applications. So if you want to head over to my forum, go into the forum, find the recruitment thread, and and go and comment, do the requirements that are on the forum, and then send an application in game, and I will personally look through at all your different applications and accept them or decline them depending on what you have put. Anyway guys, see you next time, have a good one.